Hi, welcome to the Captain Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today, we have Training Chief Eric Merrill and Captain Jim Bushman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. This is really the first in a series that we're going to do on the Legato fire. And Eric, the fact that you were the incident commander because you were acting as BC that day, battalion chief, and Jim, you were the first in company officer,
Yes.
although he beat you to the scene,
Yes.
just circumstances that we'll find out about. So April 1st, reminder for the public, we had a very significant fire at the Legato Luxury Apartment Complex. Came out about 1:16 in the morning. Complex was about 53% done. We do know that it was an incendiary fire, and when they catch the suspect, he'll be charged with arson under Arizona statute. So we know it was a lit fire. We really can't talk about it more than that at this point, but we can talk about what we as CAFMA did that night. So Eric, let's start with you. You were acting as the battalion chief that day. You're a battalion chief level, but you were acting as the battalion chief that day. Mm-hmm. What did you do Sunday when you were acting as battalion 3?
So because my role is training chief, and I get less repetition, running IC on incidents. So I was afforded the opportunity for overtime. I was able to be battalion chief that day. So just like anybody, anytime that you don't get the reps in something, well, we're going to go get the reps. So one thing that I did is I thought about what's some target hazards in the area in which would host a vulnerability. Well, Legato has always been a vulnerability because it's under construction. And there's a lot of things, caveats to it that we're not used to in our area that we've been trying to mitigate with training for the last 18 months to 2 years. So I went for a drive that afternoon and went and drove around the complex just to make sure I remembered where all my hydrants were, what were the exposures, what would be the life safety, factors in the event that there was an incident there that day.
Okay. Now, Jim, you and your crew have had access to Legato for quite some time now. You're probably the person with the most experience going into that building, understanding the building and its layout, hydrant locations, all of that. What are some of the things that you did leading up to that day with your crew?
There's an opportunity for us to learn in anything. And when we were told that we could start doing some tours with Randy, who was the general manager, I took the opportunity and said, this is a building that is going to be in my first due area. I like to take threats right on the nose. Mm-hmm. And so I got a hold of Carrie in our prevention office, and she arranged for us to be meeting there pretty much every Wednesday for a period of time. So whether I was on duty and took my crew with me or I went over there individually, I wanted to know the ins and outs of this. I wanted to get the idea. And so with that, building that relationship and asking questions like, hey, can I come and train here? Randy was very open and very supportive of that. And so there was multiple days, 5 or 6 different days that I took crews over there, including bringing a crew from Prescott over to our Engine 51. Right. And we were there the week before this fire, just practicing on taking hose to the top floor and efficiency and effectiveness, so that when it was ready, we were ready.
Very good. So, Eric, when you were out that night, you caught a medical call that you weren't assigned to, but you went along just to see if you could help. Mm-hmm. And this call goes out. Yeah. What happened?
So, I was on an EMS call at the Valley View Apartments, which was only about a 2-minute drive away, code 3. And I wasn't attached to the call, but we were just in the parking lot handing boxes up to the AMBO for them to transport when my phone buzzed. I heard a lot of tones on my radio, and I thought, well, that could be me. So I ended up stepping away from the ambulance because of the exhaust and the sound of it, so I could hear. And as I'm looking at my phone, I see the address, and I went, what are the odds that 1 o'clock in the morning, the biggest fire in our history just ticked off, and here we go. So I walked out to the back of my truck. I saw the glow and immediately realized that that's not normal because on my way to that EMS call about 15, 20 minutes earlier, I'm driving in that general direction, and I'm going code 2 because I wasn't assigned. So I can hear, I can see. There was no glow. There was nothing that would have tipped me off that was going to happen in 20 minutes. So jumped in the truck, went en route, immediately struck a second alarm. And one of the early reports was that it was a parking garage on fire. Obviously, we'd been doing this long enough to know that when somebody says something, an RP, what we call them, somebody says something to dispatch and says, hey, this is what I think.
Somebody
Yeah.
who called to report.
Yeah. Those descriptions sometimes aren't always accurate. However, I knew it was enough to go off of from what I could see from what the report was, that probably not the parking garage, but this was going to be a significant event. So
Right.
I struck a second alarm, which would be a double complement of what we would get in a normal structure fire, which would be 3 engines and a chuck company.
Okay.
And proceeded to move in that direction. Luckily, I had a police escort in front of me from the call that we were on.
Right.
So I could just follow him in, and which was nice because I didn't have to look at my map as I'm
Sure.
driving. So just watching the glow and saying a little prayer en route, and knowing that we're about to go to work in about 1 minute. So
Right.
I did key up the mic and let everybody know that, no, this is the Legato apartment complex, and there is a heavy glow.
What did you see when you first pulled up?
So when I came in off Florentine, and so the far stretch, and when we pull up the video, I'll have Jim kind of point at some of these things, but that far stretch over by BMO Bank, I saw there was a glow coming from there, and I saw a glow going from that far corner, that southwest corner of what I would call a box. What we do traditionally in the fire service is we break things into boxes, and a mantra that we go by is just keep it in the box. Well, I created a box, even though it kind of had some fingers and had an interesting
Right.
design to it, architecturally speaking. Just create a box, A, B, and C, D corners, and make sure that you have enough resources to plug those corners in and keep that box secured.
Right.
So I took a left on Main Street because I wanted to head to where the heavy glow was. And once I came around past that little roundabout by the putt-putt, I noticed that I had, in some portions, I had floors 5 and 6. Another portion I had floors 3 and 4 going up, and what we know about fire is it always goes up and out.
Right.
So my size up was confirming this is Legato, and that I've got floors 3 and 4 involved, but that was on one section, as there's kind
Right.
of like 4 or 5 different sections to this. But I did come back and confirm that it's not the parking garage; it was actual the structural members. So I made my way back to Glassford, headed north. What we typically do on fires is we want a 360. That's part of our size up.
Right.
And a structure this large, and typically, these structures, commercial structures, we talk about is very difficult for the IC to get a 360 because you're not going to be on foot and walk it. Well, I'm in a
Right.
vehicle, so I was able to drive it. What I did notice on Glassford Hill, though, is I had smoke lay down on top of me to where I couldn't see in front of me, and I started taking embers and debris hitting my windshield. It was kind of like in Armageddon when all those little meteorites are crashing down. So I shook off the surrealness of the situation, asked for more law enforcement to shut down Glassford. And then I'm like, well, I got enough time. I got greedy and I was like, oh, I can make a second lap and see how it's evolving. And on my second lap, I run into my brother Jim over by that putt-putt kind of in that area, and was able to basically give him an order without having to use a lot of words, because I knew, working in training, how much dedication and time he'd put towards training. He knew what he wanted to do without me having to tell him. And I feel like that's one of the keys to a good culture, is that you should, just like Jim doesn't tell his firefighter how to pull the line, where to put the water, you guys train enough on it. And so I just gave him a quick order, hey, grab that supply and pinch that corner. And he's like, got it, already on it.
So I'm going to say this before somebody out there says it.
Yeah.
It's a huge fire.
Yeah.
To just say, listen, water
Mm-hmm.
on that until it goes out.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting is when you look at, yes, you're going to need a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about like kind of things that even you helped me with in terms of making sure there's enough pressure and contacting the proper city resources to make sure that we wouldn't lose pressure.
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty easy. And I know there's like a joke online about a guy saying, I want to be the guy that drives a firefighter SUV. And he pulls up and he says, just put water on that. He's like, I
Yeah.
want that job. Well, that was kind of what my job was. However, 2 main things I was considering. One is I talked about the box. There's a reason
Right.
for that. I want to make sure that this fire doesn't get outside that box because we have exposures.
Right.
Exposures being property owners, commercial businesses that have to operate.
Right.
And there's also an apartment complex that we'll pull up here in a minute. Occupied at
Homestead.
1:16 in the morning, everybody's asleep. So we're trying to make sure that this doesn't get into the life safety component.
Right.
So, life safety of exposures and then collapse are my 2 biggest factors.
So Jim, you're at Station 50. Alarm goes off. They dispatch you to this address. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that went through my mind was I know this address. I've been there. We don't typically say where we're going. We just go
Right.
there. It hasn't been that common that we get the numbers. The other thing is there are actually 2 numbers for that building. There's actually a Florentine number, and there's actually a Main Street number that they've talked to me about how they were going to do that. But as I headed toward the trucks, I recognized that, you know what, this is starting. I could start to feel that this was real. And then his voice came across the radio and said, "Strike a second alarm." And that's when it went. How did he get there first?
Right?
Because I
Wait a
don't
minute,
sleep.
this is my
He's
job.
everywhere.
And second of all, he's already calling for resources that's way above and beyond. So I immediately
Right.
suited completely up at the station, was ready to go, seat belted in as we pulled out of that bay. I was so blessed to have my entire crew. So I had
Right.
my engineer and I had both of my firefighters. We were set for success. And we pulled out of that, and as soon as we turned onto the street out by the station, I look and I see the glow, and I go, "Guys, this is going to be real, and we're going to be fighting for a long time.
Yeah.
Keep your energy and keep your head on a swivel." As we got down, we weren't even on to Sunset or Florentine for those of you guys that can recognize that street. And I was looking over there, and I said, "Guys, it is Legato." And at that point, I could see the 3 distinct flames coming from
Right.
3 different spots. I knew that this wasn't started by a lightning strike unless it struck 3 places really, really effectively.
And there was no lightning in the area.
There was no lightning. So
We would have had bigger problems, I think, had there been.
that's right. So I knew immediately, hey guys, we're going to go there. We're going to do our best. We've already talked about it. We knew where we wanted to go. I knew where the FDC connection was, the temporary
Right.
FDC. I knew where the hydrants were. I had already seen the smoke that was coming down. And so as we came down the road, there was actually more traffic on the road than I was expecting. And everybody was looking at the fire and not necessarily our noise-making fire truck.
Right. Yeah.
We noticed that we couldn't go between the Legato and the bank because it was already that hot.
Right.
And so we came down Glassford Hill and shot down there. And I'd already told the guys, we need to put some water on this and let's contain it the best that we can. That's all I said. Air brakes popped. Deck gun was flowing water very, very quickly as he was giving some orders and stuff. Simply told told dispatch, we're going to need more water.
Right.
We're going to have to get after this. And we had water on that fire faster than I expected. My
Right.
guys were ready for this.
And we brought a lot of resources in. One of Prescott's ladders was the first on scene for a ladder company. And they went right on Main Street, placed between Homestead Apartments and Legato. What-
Yeah, when I figured out what I wanted to classify as the alpha side, and then started creating divisions, which I immediately made you Division Charlie. Ryan Trask did a killer job. I made him Division Bravo. You were Charlie. I had Jason Nolan and his crew as Alpha. Essentially created divisions for all those 4 sides. But that was my biggest concern at the time, was just staging resources. Is, hey, get a supply, get put in place, but don't bottleneck this to where a truck company can't get in. Because one thing that we know with some of these streets and access is you can get everybody in there, but what you really need in there now is blocked in,
Right.
blocked out. So very good job by all the crews on scene and the divisions, soups, to allow those truck companies to get in. And we ultimately had 4 truck companies in there on all 4 sides to keep it inside that box and protect the life safety component and also the exposures.
Well, I think the training component is a very important part of this, but we're going to do that on a separate podcast because from my perspective, what we saw that night was all of the training that we've done between CAFMA and Prescott was on full display. Yeah. The other thing that I like to point out is when you listen to the radio traffic from that night, everyone is cool, calm, and collected. And I said that to somebody and they're like, yeah, but it's a big fire. You pull up, there's nothing that you can do with it. I'm like, that doesn't mean that people aren't a little anxious. But again, repetition training, everything was cool, calm, and collected. So a couple of things that we did that night. One was flying the drone. So tell me about flying the drone. Why'd you fly it? What information were you trying to gather from it?
So a couple of things. One, and you're sitting shocking with me. So I mean, we
Yeah.
can only see what we can see,
Right?
but this is a huge complex. How many total square feet was this?
685,000
Yeah, so almost 700.
approximately.
Yeah, almost 700,000 square feet of this building, and I can only see one side of it.
Kathy, can we go to the video? Let's pull the video up so that folks watching on YouTube can see what you were looking at.
Okay. So while that's pulling up, I'll just talk too that because I can only see what I can see, I have most of my crews working on this Bravo Charlie corner of this fire or this scene,
Right.
and I can't see them operate, which is actually fine because we work within a system that with training, I know I establish the personnel in the positions and then I just trust the process.
Well, you were a division. Ryan Trask was a division, so you had your people out there for that.
Yeah.
Then you had safety and Travis McElway
Yeah.
from Prescott. But clearly this video is later into the incident, but you really, given the flame length prior to some of the collapse, you really didn't want to fly a drone above it.
Right.
So talk us through what are we looking at and what specifically is the IC or a division are you looking at on here? What
So
are you
as-
looking for?
Yeah, so as an IC, I kind of want to see this footprint of what we're dealing with. I know I have my people in place, but I can't see what they're seeing. So this provides me kind of their optics or a slideshow for me. Especially as this thing was ripping earlier, by using the drone footage, I can piece together the slideshow of when my
Right.
division soups are asking for resources. I'm not trying to overcommand or outthink my people. I'm trusting my people. But the other thing too is when you have that drone, like it gives you a thermal imprint as well. You can find pockets of hidden fire. You can find your pockets that are burning more than others, and then you can dedicate. Do I need more resources to be en route? We already had a 2 alarm. I already had 2 crews
Right.
in staging. But the big thing for an IC is trust your people to do their work. But the other thing too is make sure that I have enough resources en route for them. So when they ask for a need, they don't have to wait for it.
Right. Jim, what are you seeing here?
You know, again, this is a little bit on that later side of stuff. And just reviewing the way that this is, first of all, I walked these halls. This is definitely something that I had been in. So it was hard for me. This is kind of my training center, and I really was involved with it. I was on the back side of this, so we're in Division Charlie way in the back over here. And as I saw this with this footage, I didn't know that this fire was out here in the front.
Okay.
I had no clue. In fact, I've asked the question multiple times, how long was it before this got there? When I got there, I used some tactics trying to prevent it to come around there, and that's
Right.
where my guys were put. But the footage, if I would have had this footage earlier into the scene, I think I would have applied the water maybe a little bit more precise. But to get that information, I had the resources that I needed for my side for what we could do.
Well, and while we can't release it yet, we actually have security footage that shows when that side lit off. And I don't know that you were on scene yet.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
From what we can see from the security footage, when you arrived on scene, based on what we have, all of the different wings were on fire at that point.
Those all.
Right. And you could see the footprint, as the drone was back over the other side. This side right in here, I guess if you're looking at it from home, it'd be on the left side of the screen, the drone footage. That's the side that was reinforced with steel that's still standing there.
And it was also already drywalled and
Right.
insulated.
Yes.
So I knew that they were getting ready to put some people in before the end of this year, and I knew that that was the most ready,
Right.
and most protected.
So something else to consider too is there's multiple wind shifts throughout
Right.
that incident. And that's where I think it's imperative that creating that box and you
Right.
have your resources in a position where they're outside of a collapse zone, but close enough you can still affect a difference with your suppression activities. And when I first got on scene, I asked for extra law enforcement to shut down Glassford because when I hit Glassford, I couldn't see anything.
Right.
And then on my second loop, now I can see it. And it was just surreal how many times the wind shift and watching out for my crews because where the wind pushes, that's where the smoke goes. Where the smoke goes, where
Right.
the fire goes. And so making sure that you're trying to think 10 steps ahead and having that drone footage, having more views from all those sides helps me
Yep.
make sure that I can relay this information to my dogs out there because I'm blessed that I had an absolute elite group of dudes that were out there
Right.
getting the work done, but they're working. Their optics are very right in front of them. Where my job as IC is to kind of create that big picture perspective and make sure that they're seeing the things or they hear the things that I'm seeing.
No, that was this is a big fire. I remember when I picked up my phone and looked at it at 1:16, and I saw Legato, and immediately I was wide awake, out of bed, getting dressed and out the door. And I live all the way out Cody Springs, but when I backed out of my garage, I could see the fire from my house, which is a good distance away. I responded, and I think I let you know I was responding in. And then this goes to the importance of relationships. Immediately, I started making phone calls. Started with Chief Rose, Chief Fedema. All I said to him was, Legato's on fire. And they're like, we're on our way. Which worked out great. I called Chief Dura with Prescott, and we'll have Chief Dura on to talk about that relationship at another time. But I said, Legato's on fire, and he said, I'm on my way. And then pretty soon we had the entire Prescott command staff with us. And then I called Gilbert Davidson, the town manager, and said, he called me back because he missed the first, I mean, it's 2:00 in the morning, whatever time I was calling these people. And Gilbert said, what do you need? I said, I need you to call the water department, make sure we don't lose pressure in this area. And he said, done, I'm on it. It was again, the relationships there. I started calling Brad Fain, Ron Fain, Guy Rogetson, Anessa Andrews, all people with a Fain signature to try to tell them. And then eventually I just left them a message. I'm like, hey, Legato's on fire, give me a call. Which some of them didn't get till later. But we made those calls. And then when I got on scene, I came to your truck, hopped in the passenger seat, kind of did a quick head count, what do you have? And then called for countywide mutual aid. And then when that didn't happen fast enough, I called for statewide mutual aid because we needed additional resources. But one of the things to point out to the community that some aren't aware of, they said, so I've heard some say, well, thank God all the outside units were able to come in and help control the fire. Well, we really only had one outside resource on the fire, and that was Cottonwoods Ladder 411, the first fire, structure fire for that new truck. Everything else surrounding the structure was actually CAFMA and Prescott. The other engines, so there were 9 in total that came in from countywide and statewide mutual aid. They backfilled our stations, and while they were here, they ran an additional 34 calls for help. People calling the 911 system. And in addition to Legato, and the PRCC dispatcher that night handled 133 911 calls for this fire. I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't point out the great works of Prescott Regional Communications Center and their staff.
Unsung heroes.
Absolutely. A lot of coordination. This goes a lot deeper into all of these things. Another thing I want to point out, though, is myself and Chief Dura were on a call with another chief, and Chief Dura Holger said, wow, if we put that out as a scenario during captain's promotional process, they'd say, this is unrealistic, never going to happen, this is unfair. And the other chief said, well, to be fair, you probably had a lot of seasoned people on the fire. And we said, we did not. The IC has been a battalion chief for about 2 minutes at the time. You're under 2 years as a captain?
That is correct.
Ryan Trask is about 2 years, a little over 2 years. The first in ladder company from Prescott, the captain had been on, or a captain for 8 weeks. So again, training on display. You didn't have to have 10 years as a company officer or a battalion chief. You all knew what to do instinctively when you got there, and you made the right tactical decisions right off the bat. And unfortunately, with that structure, and I think it's important to point this out, that structure was so involved with fire by the time you arrived on the scene, and because 47% of it was still wide open, there was no way that we were going to put the fire out. Like you said, Eric, keep it in the box. And if you look at the distance between Homestead Apartments and Legato, it's not that far.
Very small.
So the fact that there was minimal damage to those apartment complexes, the fact that PD was able to do what they did, Prescott Valley PD, and make the evacuations of Homestead Apartments rapidly, efficiently. And again, I'm looking to have Prescott Valley PD on at some point. I'd like to get the person who ran the evacuations on here to talk about what that was for him. One of the other things I saw that night that I've never seen before in 31 years, do you remember Chief Tyser, Prescott Valley Police Chief, jumping in the back seat with us.
Yep.
And he stayed there.
Yes.
I've never actually had a police chief work in unified command with us like that.
Yep.
And it was invaluable. It really shows the knowledge and expertise that Chief Tyser has.
Yeah.
And kudos to him because he got us coffee at like
He did.
5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Because we've been there since like 1:30, 1:45. We were in need of some coffee, and he was able to send someone to track it down for us. But we're looking to have Chief Tyser on as well. Another episode, we're going to have Gilbert Davidson on to talk about just the relationship between the town of PV. Chief Dura and I went to the town of PV last Thursday to talk to them, and most of the presentation was on what a great job they did. Because people look at the fire and they say the fire department was great. Yeah. Well, I think we did well, but when we look at this, we did well because their water department pulled off a miracle for us.
Yeah.
Their town manager is willing to answer the phone when I call. Their police chief worked in unified command. Their police force on the ground are well versed and very good at what they do, and we're able to make those evacuations. Yeah. So the town of PV deserves some credit for that, and we want to make sure we point that out. We'll have Holger on at some point because we want to do one about the relationship between Prescott and CAFMA. That night was a success from the standpoint of we kept it to the block of origin, in large part because of our relationship with Prescott and the training that we do.
And the constant drilling.
Yes.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the quarterly trainings that we do and just joint partnership. Operationally, we're one department. It doesn't matter whose logo's on any T-shirt. Operationally, from battalion chief down, you get an incident, you get in the closest units, and everybody's equally dialed in. And then I had, like say, Travis McKelway, one of my best friends, pull up right behind me. And that was a really cool moment until it's like, well, let's get to work. And then right behind him pulls in Jeff Moffitt, who's Battalion 1, the BC in Prescott. So to have those guys pull up, it doesn't matter whose logos are on the door. We're going to work.
Right.
But those two are training officers. Well, sorry, Biggie is, that's Jeff Moffitt's Biggie. You'll know why. And and he was a training officer before he went to BC.
Right.
Travis McKelway was a training officer, but now he's training captain. You're a training officer. Ryan Trask, a training officer. Multiple people on that scene are training officers. Right. So it's something to be, proud of in terms of our training translating to operations. But it's
100%.
Yeah.
Well, logistically that night we'll have Chief Rose on for this, but what our warehouse did, Josh coming out, the utility coming out, some of our folks coming in off duty to staff the utility to make sure we had food, water, the restaurants and folks around there who brought food and drink over to our folks working out there. The city of Prescott, so our fleet manager came in, went back, grabbed a fuel truck because when you're running at those RPMs and pumping a fire, you're going to use some fuel. And so they went back, grabbed a fuel truck, then the city of Prescott came in with their fuel truck. And the great thing was there's communication happening between Prescott fleet and CAFMA fleet that we don't even know about. Yeah. So the Prescott fleet knew the status of our ladder at the time, and they're like, okay, we've got both, so we'll get those in there. And then fortunately, Chief Rose was able to go get ours from fleet and bring it in. But that type of relationship where Prescott fleet is fueling CAFMA fire engines and CAFMA fleet is fueling Prescott engines, this is an incident that spans the entire community, not just CAFMA's jurisdiction, not just the town of Prescott Valley. This is an economic impact to everyone.
Yeah. If I could say two things. One, I can't believe how many good-hearted people came at 2:00 in the morning.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, and I mean even our chair board,
board chair,
Matt Zurcher.
He was there at 5.
He was there, and to have Chief Tyser sitting in the truck with us, and all of our senior staff, Tom Knapp, Holger Dura, Ralph
Lucas. Ralph went to Prescott Regional to help coordinate all of that. Yeah. Chief Schuster came in off duty, took Battalion 3, so they coordinated all the incoming mutual aid units. Kathy, could we put up a slide at the end of this as you're doing production, just naming all of the mutual aid companies that came in?
Yeah, we can do that.
That'd be great because I'd like to give them a shout out on this podcast.
Yeah.
I just can't remember all of them offhand, and I don't want to miss someone.
Even Flagstaff.
Right?
Yeah, even Flagstaff had a voicemail from them sending people. And they're excited. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, we want to help you guys. They're ready to. It's very. I don't have a word really for just how much I appreciate how much love there is out there for the fire service in this state for what we do, and we just got great partners in the state.
And what we can say for sure is the mutual aid system works.
100%.
I've been working on the statewide mutual aid committee now for 8 or 9 years. And so that's why one of my first thoughts when I got there was, hey, we need to start calling in for aid. We got to start backfilling stations. And there was no need to look at you and say, Eric, I need you to pick up the radio. You're focused on, fire in front of us. So that was something that I could do in the background and then just tell you, hey, I just called for countywide aid. And then
I check off my 201 form that, hey, that big task just got handled without
It's
me
done.
having to lift a finger.
Completely done. And we just sat next to each other and worked off, consulted. And then when I got out of the truck, John Fedema got in. So there was typically 2 people sitting up there during this entire event, which was the biggest fire in the history of our agency. I think it's one of the biggest in the history of the Quad Cities. The Whiskey Row fire might be bigger. I'm not sure. I wasn't here for that. But, this was a significant event. And big shout out goes to all of our personnel that worked that fire, the people that came in off duty to help with the fire. There was so many people there doing so many good things. And then just to point out, we were somewhat blessed that night because the wind was blowing in a direction that kept the fire from blowing into Homestead. There was a light rain because the ember wash went 2 miles plus away, and not small embers, big embers.
Oh, yeah.
And had it been a month later and everything was dry, we would have had far more issues to deal with. Thank God it wasn't, and what you did worked. What you all established from getting on the scene first and started doing, you protected all of the other exposures, kept it to the block of origin.
No injuries.
No injuries. No injuries,
That's
no
the key.
fatalities.
That's the
Nothing.
key.
And no secondary fire.
That's correct.
Just ember marks on people's cars in their driveways. And
Yeah, I'm out of Trash Battalion 3 a little bit, but hopefully we're getting a new one, right?
my Impala was the same way, sitting right next to you with all the embers falling on it. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. We may have you back another time. We'll see if we've captured everything we want to capture, but I know it's getting a little long here. I can see Kathy getting antsy over in the corner. So thanks for being here. Kathy, thank you for all the production work on this. And Jonah, appreciate that help as well. So until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe.